The first time I saw Riley Kane, she was slamming a locker shut so hard the metal screamed. Her leather jacket gleamed under the fluorescent lights of Lincoln High, and the crowd parted like she was a storm tearing through a quiet town. I was 16, a nobody with a sketchbook, and she was the hurricane everyone feared. Her reputation was a living thing, whispered in the halls of our small-town Ohio school. Riley, the girl who'd punch first and never apologize. The one who'd make you regret crossing her with a single glare. But I wasn't afraid, not exactly. Something about her sharp edges drew me in, like a moth to a blade. It was a Tuesday in October, the air crisp with the promise of fall, when our paths collided. I was late for art class, my sketchbook clutched to my chest, when I turned a corner and ran straight into her. My pencils scattered across the floor, and Riley's shadow loomed over me. "Watch it, new girl," she growled, her voice low and rough, like gravel under tires. Her green eyes locked onto mine, and for a second, forgot how to breathe. I wasn't new. Not really. I'd been at Lincoln High for 2 years, blending into the background like wallpaper. But Riley didn't notice people like me, quiet, average Emma Carter, with my messy auburn hair and thrift store sweaters. Yet there she was, staring down at me, her lips curled into something between a sneer and a challenge. "Pick up your crap," she said, kicking a pencil toward me. The hallway was silent, kids watching like vultures circling a kill. I should have cowered, apologized, done what everyone else did. Instead, I stood, my heart hammering, and met her gaze. "You could say sorry for knocking me over," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. The air shifted. Riley's eyes narrowed, and a ripple of gasps ran through the crowd. No one talked back to Riley Kane. For a moment, I thought she'd swing. But then she laughed a sharp, dangerous sound and leaned closer. "You've got guts, Carter. Let's see how long that lasts." She turned and walked away, her boots echoing like war drums. That was the start of it. The moment Riley Kane noticed me, my life stopped being invisible. I didn't know then that she was more than a bully, more than the rumors. I didn't know I'd be the one to unravel her, to find the girl behind the fists and the fear. Over the next few weeks, Riley seemed to be everywhere. In the cafeteria, her gaze would find me across the room, pinning me in place. In the parking lot, I'd catch her leaning against her beat-up motorcycle, watching me with an unreadable expression. It wasn't just intimidation, it was something heavier, something that made my pulse race and my cheeks burn. I started noticing things about her. The way her hands fidgeted when she thought no one was looking. The faint scar above her eyebrow, barely visible unless you were close. The way her laugh, rare as it was, sounded like it was fighting to escape. I sketched her in my notebook, capturing the angles of her face, the defiance in her posture. Each drawing felt like a secret I wasn't supposed to keep. One day, I stayed late after school, working on a mural for the art club. The gym was empty, the air thick with the smell of paint and dust. I was on a ladder, adding details to a sunset, when the door slammed open. Riley stormed in, her face a storm cloud. She didn't see me at first, just paced like a caged animal, muttering under her breath. "Rough day," I called out, half joking, half curious. She froze, her head snapping up. For a second, I thought she'd yell, but instead, she crossed her arms and leaned against the wall. "What's it to you, Carter?" she said, her voice softer than usual, almost tired. I climbed down, wiping paint off my hands. "You look like you need to talk," I said, surprising myself. Riley raised an eyebrow, But she didn't leave. We sat on the bleachers, the silence stretching between us. Then, haltingly, she started talking about her dad, who'd left when she was 10, about her mom, who worked double shifts and barely noticed her, about the anger that felt like it was eating her alive. I listened, my heart aching for the girl behind the armor. When she stopped, her eyes were glassy, and she looked away, embarrassed. "Why do you care?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't have an answer. Not really. All I knew was that Riley Kane wasn't just a bully, she was a puzzle, and I wanted to solve her. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying her words, her voice, the way her hands clenched when she talked about her dad. I didn't understand the pull I felt toward her, the way my chest tightened when she was near. I'd never felt this way about anyone, let alone a girl. It scared me, but it also felt like waking up. The next day, Riley was back to her old self, all sharp edges and cold stares. But something had shifted. She didn't push me away when I sat near her in the cafeteria. She didn't snap when I asked her about her motorcycle. Slowly, like cracks in ice, she let me in. By November, we were something like friends. We'd meet after school, sometimes in the art room, sometimes by the bleachers. She'd tease me about my sketches, and I'd tease her about her terrible taste in music. But there was always a line we didn't cross, a tension that hummed between us. I felt it every time our hands brushed, every time her eyes lingered on mine a second too long. One evening, we were in the art room, the sky outside turning purple. I was showing her a sketch of her motorcycle, and she leaned over my shoulder, her breath warm against my neck. "Not bad, Carter," she murmured, and my heart stopped. I turned, and our faces were inches apart. Her eyes flicked to my lips, and for a moment, I thought she'd close the distance. But then she pulled back, her expression unreadable, and left without a word. I sat there, my heart pounding, wondering what the hell was happening to me. I wasn't supposed to feel this way, not about Riley Kane, not about any girl. But the truth was clawing its way out, and I couldn't stop it. I was falling for her, and it was terrifying. Winter came to Ohio like a slap, the air sharp and biting. Riley and I were spending more time together, but the unspoken thing between us grew heavier, like a storm cloud waiting to burst. I couldn't stop thinking about that moment in the art room, her breath on my neck, the way her eyes had softened before she pulled away. School. Riley was still the queen of fear. She'd shove a freshman for looking at her wrong, or silence a classroom with a single glance. But with me, she was different. She'd show up at my locker with a smirk, tossing me a candy bar she'd borrowed from the vending machine. She'd sit with me in the art room, watching me paint, her comments sharp but never cruel. It was like she was two people, the bully everyone feared, and the girl only I got to see. One Saturday, she texted me to meet her at the old quarry outside town. It was a place kids went to drink or hook up, but Riley said she just wanted to get away. I found her sitting on a rock, her motorcycle parked nearby, the wind tugging at her jacket. She looked smaller out here, less like a legend and more like a girl carrying too much weight. "Thought you'd bail," she said as I approached, her voice teasing but her eyes searching. "Not a chance," I replied, sitting beside her. The quarry stretched out below us, a jagged scar in the earth, and the silence felt intimate, like the world was holding its breath. We talked for hours about music, about dreams, about the things we'd never told anyone. Riley admitted she wanted to leave Ohio, to ride her motorcycle across the country and never look back. "What about you, Carter?" she asked, her voice soft. What do you want? I hesitated. The truth was, I didn't know not until I met her. I want to make art, I said finally. And I want to figure out who I am. My voice cracked on the last part, and Riley's gaze sharpened. You're already you, she said, like it was the simplest thing in the world. But it wasn't simple, not for me. Not when every glance from her made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. That night, under a sky full of stars, I almost told her. The words were there, burning in my throat. I'm falling for you. But fear clamped my mouth shut. What if she laughed? What if she pushed me away? Worse, what if she didn't feel the same? The next week, things got complicated. A rumor started circling that Riley had beaten up a kid from the football team. The truth was Mercier been harassing a freshman, and Riley had stepped in, her fists faster than her words. But the school didn't care about truth. They suspended her for a week, and the whispers grew louder. I found her in the parking lot, leaning against her bike, her jaw tight. They think I'm a monster, she said, not looking at me. Maybe they're right. They're not, I said fiercely, stepping closer. You're not a monster, Riley. You're more than that. She looked at me then, her eyes raw and unguarded. For a moment, I thought she'd say something, but she just shook her head and climbed onto her bike. See you around, Carter, she said, and roared off into the dusk. I didn't see her for days. The school felt emptier without her, like the air was thinner. I kept sketching her in my notebook, her eyes, her hands, the curve of her jaw. Each drawing felt like a confession, a way to hold on to her when she was slipping away. When she came back, she was colder, her walls higher. But she still sought me out, like I was a tether she couldn't quite let go of. One day, in the art room, she caught me staring at a sketch of her. What's this? She asked, her voice sharp but curious. My face burned. Just, you, I mumbled, trying to close the notebook. She grabbed it, flipping through the pages, her expression unreadable. You see me like this? She asked finally, her voice barely audible. Yeah, I said, my heart in my throat. It's how I see you. She didn't say anything, just handed the notebook back and left. But the next day, she was softer again, sitting closer, her teasing lighter. It was like we were dancing around something neither of us could name. By December, the tension between us was unbearable. Every touch, every glance, felt like a spark waiting to ignite. I started to notice the way she'd linger when we said goodbye, the way her fingers brushed mine when she handed me a paintbrush. I wasn't imagining it, felt it too. But neither of us made a move, both too scared of what it meant. One night, there was a party at the quarry. I didn't want to go, but Riley insisted, saying I needed to live a little. The place was packed, kids drinking cheap beer, music blaring from a portable speaker. Riley was in her element, all swagger and sharp smiles, but her eyes kept finding mine across the crowd. I was sitting by the fire when she pulled me away, leading me to a quiet spot overlooking the quarry. You're too good for this place, Carter, she said, her voice low. Why do you stick around me? I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. Because you're not what they think you are, I said. And because I can't stop thinking about you. Her breath hitched, and for a moment, the world stopped. Then she stepped closer, her hand brushing my cheek. You're gonna ruin me, Emma, she whispered. And before I could respond, she kissed me. It was fierce and desperate, like she'd been holding it back for months. I kissed her back, my hands tangling in her jacket, and for the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. That kiss changed everything. It was like a dam breaking, flooding my world with color and chaos. Riley's lips were warm, her hand steady on my face, and for those few seconds, nothing else existed. No school, no rumors, no fear. Just us. But the world doesn't stop for a kiss, no matter how earth-shattering. We pulled apart, breathless, and Riley's eyes were wide, like she just jumped off a cliff. "What the hell was that, Carter?" she said, her voice shaky but not angry. "I don't know," I admitted, my heart racing. "But I want to find out." She laughed, a nervous, jagged sound, and ran a hand through her hair. "Your trouble," she said, but she didn't pull away. We sat there for a while, the party's noise fading into the background, talking about nothing and everything. It was the first time I saw Riley truly unguarded, her walls down, her smile soft. The next day, reality hit hard. Someone had seen us at the quarry. By Monday, the whispers were everywhere. Riley Kane and Emma Carter, the bully and the nobody, caught kissing in the dark. The rumors twisted the truth, painting Riley as a predator, me as a victim. Kids stared, teachers whispered, and my parents started asking questions I didn't know how to answer. Riley took it harder than I did. She was used to being feared, not pitied. "They think I corrupted you," she said one day, her voice bitter as we hid out in the art room. "Like I'm some kind of villain." "You're not," I said, grabbing her hand. "Let them talk. I don't care." But I did care. And so did she. The rumors were relentless, and they brought out the worst in people. A group of jocks cornered me after school, calling me names I'd never heard before, their laughter sharp and cruel. Riley found us just in time, her fists clenched, ready to fight. I pulled her away before she could swing, but the look in her eyes broke my heart. Anger, yes, but also shame. That night, I went to her house, small, run-down place on the edge of town. Her mom was at work, and Riley let me in, her expression guarded. "Why are you here, Emma?" she asked, leaning against the kitchen counter, her arms crossed. "Because I'm not letting you push me away," I said, stepping closer. I meant what I said at the quarry. "I want thesis." She looked at me, her eyes searching, and then she kissed me again, softer this time, like she was afraid I'd break. "You don't know what you're getting into," she whispered against my lips. "Then show me," I said, and she did. We spent the night talking, kissing, laughing, our hands exploring each other like we were mapping new territory. It was terrifying and exhilarating, like stepping into a world I'd only dreamed of. But the outside world kept pressing in. My parents found out about the rumors and sat me down for a talk. They weren't cruel, just confused, their questions laced with worry. "Is this who you are, Emma?" my mom asked, her voice trembling. I didn't have an answer. Not yet. All I knew was that Riley made me feel alive, and I wasn't giving that up. School. Things got worse. Someone spray-painted a slur on Riley's locker, and she didn't show up for days. When I finally found her, she was at the quarry, her knuckles bruised, her eyes distant. "I can't do this, Emma," she said, her voice flat. "I'm no good for you." "Don't say that," I snapped, grabbing her shoulders. "You don't get to decide what's good for me." She looked at me, her expression torn, and then she pulled me into her arms. holding me like I was the only thing keeping her grounded. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I've never felt like this before." "Me neither," I said, and we stood there, holding each other as the wind howled around us. The next few weeks were a blur of stolen moments and whispered confessions. We'd sneak away to the art room, the quarry, anywhere we could be alone. Riley started opening up more, telling me about her dreams, her fears, the girl she used to be before the world hardened her. I told her about my own fears about not fitting in, about disappointing my parents, about the part of me that was still figuring out who I loved. But the rumors didn't stop, and neither did the hate. Someone slashed the tires on Riley's motorcycle, and I found a note in my locker that made my blood run cold. "Stay away from her, or else." I didn't tell Riley she'd have gone looking for a fight, and I couldn't lose her to that. Instead, I focused on us. I painted a portrait of her, capturing the fire in her eyes, the softness she hid from the world. When I showed it to her, she was quiet for a long time, her fingers tracing the canvas. "This is how you see me?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. "It's who you are," I said, and she kissed me, her hands trembling. But the pressure was building, and I knew it couldn't last. Something had to give. Spring came, but it didn't feel like renewal. The air at Lincoln High was thick with tension, and Riley and I were caught in the middle. We were careful now, meeting in secret, avoiding the places where eyes followed us. But secrets have a way of slipping out, and ours was no exception. One afternoon, I found Riley in the art room, staring at my portrait of her. "You make me look like a hero," she said, her voice quiet. "I'm not." "You are to me," I said, stepping closer. She shook her head, but she didn't pull away when I took her hand. We sat on the floor, surrounded by paint cans and sketches, and for a moment, it was just us. But then the door slammed open, and Jake Thompson, the football team's golden boy, stood there with a smirk. "Well, look at this," he sneered, his friends behind him. The bully and her girlfriend. Riley was on her feet in an instant, her fists clenched. "Get out," she growled, but Jake just laughed. "Make me," he said, stepping closer. I grabbed Riley's arm, trying to pull her back, but she shook me off. The air crackled with danger, and I knew this wasn't going to end well. "Stop it, Jake," I said, my voice shaking. "Leave us alone." He ignored me, his eyes on Riley. "You think you're tough, Kane. You're just a freak who likes girls." Riley lunged, but I stepped between them, my heart pounding. "Enough," I shouted, surprising myself. Jake blinked, caught off guard, and for a moment, no one moved. Then he laughed, a cruel, mocking sound, and left with his friends trailing behind. Riley was shaking, her eyes wild. "Why do you do that?" she demanded. I could have handled him. "Because I don't want you to get hurt," I said, my voice breaking. "Not for me." She looked at me, her anger fading into something softer. "You're too good, Emma," she said, pulling me into a hug. But I could feel the weight of her words, the fear that she wasn't enough. That night, I went home to find my parents waiting. They'd heard about the confrontation, and their faces were grim. "We're worried about you, Emma," my dad said. "This thing with Riley, it's not safe." "It's not a thing," I said, my voice sharp. "I love her." The words hung in the air, heavy and true. My parents stared at me, their expressions a mix of shock and sadness. "You're young," my mom said finally. "You don't know what you're saying." But I did. I knew it in my bones. In the way my heart raced when Riley smiled. In the way her touch made the world make sense. I just didn't know how to make them understand. The next day, Riley was different, distant. Her walls back up. "We need to talk," she said, pulling me to the bleachers after school. Her voice was flat, her eyes avoiding mine. "This isn't working." My heart stopped. "What are you talking about?" "Us," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm dragging you down, Emma. You don't deserve this, the rumors, the hate. You should be with someone normal." "Don't you dare," I said, grabbing her jacket. "You don't get to decide what I deserve. I choose you." She looked at me, her eyes glistening. "You shouldn't," she whispered, and walked away. For the next week, Riley avoided me. She skipped school, ignored my texts, left me drowning in my own thoughts. I kept replaying our last conversation, wondering if I'd pushed too hard, if I'd scared her off. My sketches turned dark, all jagged lines and shadowed eyes, a reflection of the ache in my chest. But I wasn't giving up. I knew Riley was scared, not just of us but of herself. She'd spent so long building walls. It was hard for her to believe someone could love her through them. So I made a plan. I spent hours in the art room, working on something Newa mural. Not for the school but for her. It was her motorcycle, her leather jacket, her eyes, all woven into a vibrant explosion of color. At the bottom, in small letters, I wrote, "You are enough." I texted her to meet me at the quarry, saying it was important. When she showed up, her expression was guarded, but her eyes softened when she saw the mural, propped up against a rock. "What is this?" she asked, her voice rough. "It's you," I said, stepping closer. "It's how I see you. And I'm not letting you run away from this from us." She stared at the mural, her hands shaking. "Emma, I'm a mess," she said. "I don't know how to do this." "Then we'll figure it out together," I said, taking her hand. "I'm not going anywhere." For a moment, she just looked at me, her walls crumbling. Then she pulled me into her arms, and I felt her heart racing against mine. "You're gonna be the death of me, Carter," she whispered, but she was smiling. We kissed again, slower this time, like we were promising each other something. The world was still out there, full of hate and judgment, but in that moment, it didn't matter. We had each other, and that was enough. The mural changed something in Riley. She was still the girl who could silence a room with a glare. But with me, she was softer, more open. We were careful at school, keeping our distance in the halls. But we stole moments wherever we could, in the art room, at the quarry, in the quiet of her house when her mom was at work. Each touch, each kiss, felt like a rebellion against the world that wanted to tear us apart. But the world wasn't done with us. The rumors had quieted, but the tension lingered, like a storm waiting to break. Jake and his friends kept their distance, but their smirks followed us everywhere. My parents were still uneasy, their questions softer but no less pointed. "Are you sure about this, Emma?" my mom asked one night, her eyes searching mine. "I've never been more sure," I said, and for the first time, I meant it completely. Loving Riley wasn't just a feeling, it was a choice, one I made every day. One afternoon, we were in the art room when the principal called Riley to his office. She came back an hour later, her face pale, her fists clenched. "They're threatening to expel me," she said, her voice low. "Another incident. And I'm out." "What happened?" I asked, my stomach twisting. "Jake's dad complained," she said, her eyes dark. "Said I'm a disruptive influence. They don't care that he's been harassing us. They just want me gone." I was furious, but Riley just shook her head. "It's not worth fighting," she said. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong here." "Don't say that," I snapped, grabbing her hand. "You belong wherever I am." She looked at me, her eyes softening, and for a moment, I thought I'd reached her. But then she pulled away, her expression closing off. "I need to think, Emma," she said, and left me standing there, my heart in pieces. The next few days were torture. Riley was distant again, her texts short, her eyes avoiding mine. I knew she was scared, not just of expulsion but of what we were becoming. Loving someone is terrifying when you've spent your life pushing people away. I decided to fight for her, even if she wouldn't fight for herself. I went to the principal, armed with sketches and stories, telling him about the Riley I knew, the one who protected kids from bullies, who dreamed of a bigger life, who was trying so hard to be more than her reputation. He listened, but his face was unreadable. "I'll consider it," he said, and sent me away. That night, I found Riley at the quarry, sitting on her rock, staring at the stars. "You talked to the principal?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Why would you do that?" "Because I love you," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "And I'm not letting them take you away from me." She stared at me, her eyes wide, and then she laughed. A raw, broken sound. "You're impossible, Carter," she said, pulling me into her arms. "I don't deserve you." "Yes, you do," I said, kissing her fiercely. "And I'm going to keep proving it." The next day, the principal called us both in. He said he'd reviewed Riley's record and decided to give her a warning instead of expulsion. "But one more slip-up, Miss Kane, and you're out," he warned. Riley nodded, her face unreadable. But when we left his office, she squeezed my hand so tight it hurt. We were okay, for now. But the fight wasn't over. The school was still a minefield, and my parents were still struggling to understand. I started researching, reading about other kids like us, about communities where we could be ourselves. I showed Riley articles about cities like San Francisco, where people like us weren't just tolerated but celebrated. Her eyes lit up, and for the first time, I saw hope in her. We started planning, dreaming about a future where we could be together without fear. It was a fragile hope, but it was ours. We'd lie on her bed, her fingers tracing patterns on my arm, talking about the places we'd go, the lives we'd build. "You and me against the world, Carter," she'd say, and I'd believe her. But reality has a way of crashing in. One day, I found a new note in my locker, more threatening than the last. "You and your girlfriend are done," it read, the words scrawled in angry red ink. I showed it to Riley, and her face darkened. "I'm handling this," she said, her voice cold. "No," I said, grabbing her arm. "We're handling it. Together." She looked at me, her eyes fierce, and nodded. "Together," she said, and I knew she meant it. We didn't know who was behind the notes, but we suspected Jake and his friends. We started watching our backs, sticking closer together, refusing to let fear win. It wasn't easy, But it made us stronger. Every challenge, every whispered slur, only made me love Riley more. She wasn't just the girl who'd stolen my heart, she was the girl who'd taught me to fight for it. Summer was coming. And with it, the promise of freedom. Riley and I were counting down the days until graduation, dreaming of leaving Ohio behind. But the present was a battlefield, and we were still in the thick of it. The notes kept coming, each one uglier than the last. We reported them to the principal, but without proof. He could only promise to keep an eye out. Riley was on edge, her fists always half clenched, her eyes scanning every crowd. I hated seeing her like this. The girl who'd once seemed untouchable, now haunted by shadows. One afternoon, we were at the quarry when she broke down. "I'm so tired, Emma," she said, her voice cracking. "Tired of fighting. Tired of hiding. I just want to be with you." "You are with me," I said, pulling her close. "And we're going to get through this." She buried her face in my shoulder, and I felt her tears soak through my shirt. It was the first time I'd seen her cry, and it broke something in me. I vowed then and there to find out who was behind the notes, to end this once and for all. I started paying attention, watching the people around us. Jake was the obvious suspect, but he was too smug, too open about his hatred. This felt sneakier, more personal. I started asking questions, talking to kids who'd been on the fringes of Riley's old fights. Most were too scared to say much, but one girl, a quiet sophomore named Mia, gave me a lead. "Check the art club," she whispered. "Someone's been hanging around your stuff." The art club was my sanctuary, but now it felt tainted. I started staying late, pretending to work on projects, watching for anything suspicious. One night, I caught her, Lindsay, a girl from my art class, slipping a note into my locker. She froze when she saw me, her face pale. "Why?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger. "Why are you doing this?" She broke down, tears streaming down her face. "I was jealous," she admitted. "You and Riley, you're so sure of yourselves. I've been hiding who I am for years, and seeing you together it hurt." I was stunned. Lindsay was quiet, unassuming, the last person I'd suspect. But her words hit me hard. She wasn't just attacking us, she was attacking the courage we'd found, the love we were building. I didn't tell Riley right away. I knew she'd want to confront Lindsay, and I wasn't sure that was the answer. Instead, I talked to Lindsay, really talked. She told me about her own struggles, about the fear that kept her in the closet, about the pain of watching us live the life she wanted. By the end, we were both crying, and I promised not to turn her in if she stopped the notes. When I told Riley, she was furious at first. Her hands balled into fists. But then she listened, really listened, and her anger softened. "You're too good, Carter," she said, pulling me into a hug. "But I'm glad you are." The notes stopped, and for a while, things were better. We focused on the future, on the road trip we'd take after graduation, on the life we'd build together. Riley started talking about art school, about maybe finding a way to channel her anger into something creative. I loved seeing her like this, hopeful, alive, mine. But the peace didn't last. Jake and his friends were still a problem, their taunts growing bolder. One day, they cornered us in the parking lot, their laughter sharp and cruel. "You two think you're untouchable," Jake sneered, stepping closer. Riley stepped in front of me, her eyes blazing. "Back off, Thompson," she said, her voice low and dangerous. He laughed, but there was fear in his eyes. Riley's reputation still held weight. And for once, I was glad. They backed off. But the encounter left us shaken. We knew it wasn't over. That night, we made a pact. No matter what happened, we'd face it together. We'd fight for each other. For the life we wanted. Riley took my hand, her grip firm, and said, "You and me, Carter. Always." Always. I echoed, and we sealed it with a kiss. The stars above us brighter than ever. As graduation loomed, we started to feel the weight lifting. The future was so close. We could taste it. But there was one last hurdle. Me parents. They'd been trying, but they still didn't fully understand. I decided it was time for them to meet Riley. Not as the school bully, but as the girl I loved. I invited her over for dinner. My stomach in knots. Riley was nervous too. Her usual swagger replaced by a quiet intensity. My parents were polite, but the tension was thick. Then Riley started talking about her dreams, her fears, the way she was trying to be better. By the end of the night, my mom was crying, and my dad was nodding, like he was finally seeing her. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. And for the first time, I felt like we might actually make it. Graduation day was a blur of caps and gowns, cheers and tears. Riley and I stood side by side, our hands brushing under our robes. A secret promise in the chaos. We'd made it through the rumors, the threats, the fear. But the real test was still ahead, the world beyond Lincoln High. That night, we drove to the quarry, our spot, our sanctuary. The air was warm, the stars bright, and Riley's hand was steady in mine. "We did it," she said, her voice soft but strong. "We're free." "Not yet," I said, smiling. "But we're getting there." We'd planned it a road trip across the country, starting in California. We'd saved every penny, pooling our money for gas and cheap motels. Riley's motorcycle was ready, and my sketchbook was packed, ready to capture the journey. It wasn't just about leaving Ohio, it was about finding ourselves, together. But first, we had one last thing to do. The next day, we went to the school one final time, to the art room where it all began. I'd finished the mural, the one I'd made for Riley, and we hung it on the wall, a gift to the place that had tried to break us. The principal saw it and didn't say a word, but I saw the flicker of respect in his eyes. As we stood there, looking at the mural, Riley took my hand. "I was scared, you know," she said. "Scared of letting you in. Scared of what it meant. But you made me believe I could be more." "You always were more," I said, my voice thick. "You just needed someone to see it." She kissed me then, right there in the art room, with the sunlight streaming through the windows. It wasn't fierce or desperate, it was soft, certain, a promise of everything to come. The road trip was everything we dreamed of. We rode through deserts and mountains, stopping at diners and dive bars, sketching and laughing and falling more in love with every mile. Riley's smile was brighter out here, her edges softer, like the open road was washing away the pain of the past. One night, in a small town in Arizona, we lay on a blanket under the stars, her head on my chest. "I used to think I'd always be the bully," she said, her voice quiet. "The girl everyone feared. But you changed that, Emma. You made me want to be better." "You were always better," I said, kissing her forehead. "You just needed to believe it." We didn't know what the future held: college, jobs, the challenges of a world that wasn't always kind to girls like us. But we knew we'd face it together. Riley wasn't the bully anymore. And I wasn't the nobody. We were just us. Two girls who'd found each other in the chaos. Who'd fought for love and won. As we drove toward the Pacific, the wind in our hair and the road stretching out before us, I felt a peace I'd never known. Riley reached for my hand, her fingers intertwining with mine. And I knew this was just the beginning. We'd face whatever came next. Not as the bully and the nobody, but as Emma and Riley. Unbreakable. Unstoppable. In love. And that was enough.